are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back once again to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I'm happy to be here once again to provide a new show for you and a new topic. Before I get into today's show, let me give my free business shout out. Once again, a free business shout out goes out to the Stephanie Renee Salon, located at 1614 West Main Street in Kalamazoo, Michigan, zip code 49006. If you'd like to reach them, you can call them at 269-459-6535. That's 269-459-6535. They provide natural hair care products and more. Once again, that's Stephanie Renee's Salon, conveniently located inside Cali Beauty. Also, Oni Tase, from the pro-Black perspective, has this to say.
Zubiri lives in a prosperous, independent African community named the Ma'a Nation. He is a liberated man, protecting his community, participating in his local economy, and traveling the world. Along the way, he meets two liberated women, Merkia and Isad, and he has to vet both for the sake of his son, Amadi. Zubiri and the Maroons of Ma'a explores African liberation through intelligent dialogue and a realistic description of what if we protected Black Wall Street, or what if we pursued Pan-Africanism. This is the book suitable for all ages, reading levels, and occasions, and it is the perfect gift for any Black person wishing to understand manhood and womanhood from a strong Black perspective. Purchase while you still can. Peace seeker, if you seek to develop prosperous, independent African communities at home and abroad, the Pro-Black Compendium should be your next purchase. No other book offers as complete a study on you. Your ancestors urged you to know yourself. The Pro-Black Compendium informs you on you, your ancestors' enemies, your enemies, and what you can do today to live free. Purchase today while you still can.
Yes, indeed. That's Oni Tase. Please support the brother. Also listen to his podcast. He did a podcast today that talks about white feminism and its distraction to Black women. I think it's a real good show, breaking down some real good analysis of the situation that is feminism and how it's affecting Black women and in turn really affecting the Black community. You should check it out today. Also, make sure to check us out on Instagram. Check out our parent radio station, KWAZ Radio, on Instagram. Check us out at the Bitter Medicine Podcast on Instagram. Make sure to like and to follow us or subscribe to all of our really social media. We would appreciate that. Especially we are trying to get our numbers up on YouTube as far as subscriptions go. Please don't hesitate. Go today and subscribe to us on YouTube. Subscribe to the Pro-Black Perspective on YouTube. And subscribe to KWAZ Radio on YouTube. So today's show, what is it that I am looking to talk about today? Well, Tariq Nasheed just recently had a debate with one Jared Taylor, a white man who definitely supports white supremacy and white supremacist thinking. And originally I was considering doing a blow-by-blow covering of, commentary of the whole debate. But the whole debate was almost 2 hours in length, somewhere around 157 or something like that. So it was almost 2 hours in length. And I really didn't think that the debate in totality was that hard hitting, to be honest. Nothing against Tariq Nasheed in this respect, but I don't think the debate itself was hard hitting, and I'll break down why. I'm going to take a snippet from the show, and that's going to be the basis of today's discussion. Today's discussion is about the I.Q. lie, the low intelligence, low I.Q. score lie that white folks have been perpetrating on black folks for decades now. And a lot of us black folks believe this shit because a white person said it. We believe this shit because some family member of ours may have had a low IQ. And I've known people who have been harmed. It's changed their life, this notion of low IQ and how people treated them for it. And I'm here to tell you today all about it and to tell you that it's really something you shouldn't allow to mess with you or mess with your family, your children, and young people in general. And if you're an educator and you hear this show, by all means, please reach out to me. We can discuss this further. I think this is something that really needs to be tackled, especially when we start talking about African-centered education. You can't have an African-centered education and you still going by these European principles of intelligence when it comes to black folks. Before I play the clip from the debate that stood out the most to me, this part of the debate is what stood out most. I want to say something to all black folks, really, but to people like Tariq Nasheed specifically. You got to stop doing these debates with these white supremacists. I don't even say suspected white supremacists. You've got to stop doing these debates because it's not looking good. To Tariq's stands, his super fans, they will say, "Oh, Tariq bodied the debate and he killed Jared Taylor and all this kind of stuff." But that's intellectually dishonest. Ironically enough, that's dishonest. The thing about these debates with white folks, I was just telling a friend / colleague of mine this recently, with white supremacists and the whole system of so-called white supremacy, which, as you know, we like to call white inferiority complex. The truth of the matter is that they've had so long to tell these black lies. They've had so long now to tell these lies on black people that they've perfected the lying. In fact, a lot of them believe the lies now, and they're born into these lies for generations now. So when you have a so-called debate or a conversation with a white supremacist, you have to be that much more thorough. You have to be that much more articulate. You have to be that much more fact-based in your argument when you talk to these guys. And that's aside from kind of trying to control the narrative a little bit better and stuff like that. But when you have them in these conversations, they're always going to go to their statistics. You have to have your statistics to counter it and your logic to counter these arguments. And in fact, I'm going to use a Tariq Nasheed statement. He made a statement last year that I think was very true at the time, and I think, funny enough, it applies to him right now. When Floyd Mayweather was going to fight Conor McGregor, Tariq Nasheed said Floyd better really beat McGregor, because if it's close at all, if it's not a knockout or something like that, yeah, he has to be careful. Floyd has to be careful that these white supremacists don't take the victory from him. And Tariq Nasheed needs to keep this in mind. If you're going to debate these guys, you have to beat them soundly. If it's a 50-50 ball, they're taking it. Not just them, but their people, their followers, they're taking that. You have people who are still saying McGregor, who was it? Skip Bayless is one of these guys, who was still saying McGregor was going to beat Floyd, or the ref saved Floyd, and all this old kind of stuff like that, because Floyd didn't knock him out. You got to knock these white boys out and stand over them like a Ali would. Because anything less than that, even though you didn't win, or I should say, even though you didn't lose, you still didn't win as far as they're concerned. So I want guys out there, if you're listening to this and you find yourselves oftentimes or at any time speaking to white supremacists, white people with white supremacist viewpoints and talking points, keep that in mind. It doesn't make sense talking to them if you can't be thorough enough to talk and counter their points. So that's my message to a Tariq Nasheed and his fans. Stop talking about he bodied this Jared Taylor. He didn't. He went toe-to-toe with him, yes, but he didn't outright win. He didn't outright lose. But as far as white supremacists go, as far as their people go, and even as far as some blacks go, as far as their understanding, Tariq didn't win. It's only you stan types, you super fans who would say Tariq bodied the guy. And that's wrong on your part, because you're promoting mediocrity as winning. You can't boost someone up who did an okay job. You boost people up who did a great job, not an okay job. You boost up winners, not participants. Okay, so I just want to get that out of the way. Again, I'm saying this to help, not hurt. Me personally, I don't think I would really waste my time with white supremacists and trying to debate them. What for? My time is better spent getting our people the information, getting our people the knowledge, getting our people on code, getting our people to open their minds to different aspects of their life, their living. And if I know that I'm not going to body the debate, if I feel that there's a chance that I'm not, it doesn't make sense. You're not going to look good coming out of it to anyone who's being real honest. Ironically, Umar Johnson could have bodied that guy, Jared Taylor, because Umar has so much knowledge. He has such a good, oratory style. He speaks well. He's knowledgeable. He could not only go toe to toe with the guy, but he'll destroy him. And I have my issues with Umar too, but in this instance, he would destroy him. He wouldn't just say white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, sanction, white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, sanction. Like he would come with something substantive, something deep, something you could look up, something you can't refute. At least that's my opinion. But like I said, in today's show, I want to talk about this lie that's been perpetrated on black folks, that black folks have this low IQ thing, because the whole IQ thing is all of the results of IQs historically, and just how the whole IQ test is set up, just how testing and education in this part of the world is set up, is anti-African because it's pro-European. Let me say that again. The way most things, education especially, the way that's set up in this hemisphere is anti-African, which is to say that it's pro-European. And so, if you understand that, you would know that you can't put so much depth or invest so much emotion into IQ scores. To begin with, IQ scores are flawed. Let me play this clip, this portion of the so-called debate between Tariq Nasheed and Jared Taylor. And on the other side of this clip, I'll break down my thoughts on what's said and the whole notion of what an IQ is.
A lot of African immigrants, you spoke about Nigerian immigrants. Do you know what we're talking about IQ? Nigerian immigrants, they come over here and academically outperform whites and Asians. They do much better than Asians. So that kind of throws the whole IQ thing out the window. We're talking about race and IQ.
Well, but why does a white supremacist society permit such a thing?
Well, you can't really do anything what's going on in that person's mind. You know, a person is smart, they're smart. But
wait. If people are smart, they're smart. You're assuming, of course, that on average, black people are just as smart, maybe smarter than white people, right?
Not maybe smarter, but we have the same level of intelligence, of course.
Okay. Of course. All right. It goes without saying.
No, are you saying we don't have the same level of intelligence as whites?
Okay. I was just checking on that. I thought you might think that black people are actually smarter. But let's get back to the Supreme Court.
But you didn't answer that. You danced a little bit. You're dancing with the stars. Do you think that black people have equal intelligence as whites, Mr. Taylor?
No, I don't. On average, the black IQ is 85.
Why are black people as smart? What is it about black people that makes them less smart?
Oh, well, there are all kinds of things that go into what is called intelligence, the structure of the brain, the way the gray matter and the white matter interact, the rapidity of signals transmitted on neurons. We don't really know in 100% the biological underpinnings of intelligence. But I think the evidence is overwhelming that East Asians, on average, are somewhat more intelligent than whites, and whites more intelligent than blacks. But aside, I know you're not going to agree on that, and you're not even interested in the evidence.
Let me unpack that, because if black people are less intelligent, why the need for systematic deprivation? Why would the white supremacists do things like not allow black people to read, make it illegal for black people to read, which is what happened here in the United States for a long time? Why would they do that for people who are already less intelligent?
We're talking about the United States today. You're saying the United States today is a white supremacist society. I do not deny that in the past, the United States could be described as white supremacist. But let's get back to the Supreme Court.
But you didn't answer the question. That's a very valid question. If we were, and they were saying the same thing you're saying back then. Back in the 1800s, the 1900s, they would say the same thing, that black people, our IQs are just not high. We're not as intelligent. Thomas Jefferson, he wrote a whole book, Letters from the State of Virginia, about how our IQs, not our IQ, but how our intelligence level was just so low. But at the same time, black people were not allowed to read. So why would you not allow a people to read and make it a crime if they were already less intelligent? I'm trying to understand.
First of all, Letter from the State of Virginia has only a few little remarks about blacks. It's about the state of Virginia. I mean, I realize that you think that white people are obsessed with by black people, and that's all they ever think about 24 hours a day.
You know, that book was the foundation of modern white supremacy ideology. You know that.
Oh, okay. No, I don't, in fact, know that. But Letters from the State of Virginia covers a lot.
Go on and on about how inferior black people were.
Look, there are just a few passages in that book about black people.
And how inferior we were in that book. In those few passages, he was talking about how inferior we were.
He thought that blacks on average were less intelligent than whites. Now, nobody ever pretended, no one ever pretended that there were not some blacks who could read. No one ever suspected otherwise. He knew about, Thomas Jefferson knew about blacks who could read as well. No one ever doubted that they could read.
Well, why think it's illegal for black people to read if we're just so less intelligent?
Well, the whole idea, in those states and at those times in which it was illegal, now don't forget, slavery was an extremely variegated thing. Any generalization about slavery is likely to be completely wrong because it was so different depending on the time, so different depending on the place. There were, in some circumstances, laws against teaching slaves how to read, not blacks in general, but slaves how to read, because it was thought that that might contribute to some sort of slave revolt or some attempt to gain freedom. But let's set that aside. I like to talk about the United States today.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
So there you have it. Before I even go further, let me just say something. For a guy who complains about people's phones who call into his show, Tariq Nasheed, who likes to call everyone's stuff janky, dude, your show is janky. That audio that you heard from him in that clip that sounded piss poor, that's from him, not from me. That's from him. But before I go further with that, I have to say this to me was the best part of the so-called debate. Because I think clearly, if you watch the debate, if you go now and watch the debate on YouTube, I think clearly Nasheed had Jared Taylor on the ropes here. He could have stuck it to him a little bit more, but I think he did sufficiently well in this section. And it was interesting to hear how these white supremacists think about intelligence and all this kind of thing like that. Now, about the IQ test. The IQ test is supposedly supposed to measure intelligence. It's supposed to measure academic potential and the likelihood for success. But it's largely bullshit. It could be useful for certain things, like, it could be useful in terms of identifying some learning needs, but it's bullshit because we know that intelligence is affected by environmental factors. The test itself doesn't test environmental or account for environmental factors, so if it doesn't do that, using logic, and we know that environmental factors contribute to IQ, then the test could never really be accurate for any innate intelligence, meaning that any genetic intelligence. Furthermore, IQ tests are not really the norm in history. IQ tests, as Tariq Nasheed mentioned there, is from the late 1800s, early 1900s. Furthermore, IQ tests is about abstract and theoretical thought. I want y'all to follow me on this. If you've ever done an IQ test, you know this. An IQ test is about abstract stuff. It's about theoretical stuff. And the African is a practical knowledge-based individual. The African, as you know yourself, is a person that gets his or her knowledge from what's happening around them. In fact, how do you think a European will do with an African-based or African-created IQ test? Let me repeat that again. The IQ test, as it stands, is abstract and theoretical. As you know, as I know, as we as Africans know, African people are more practical, knowledge-based people. We go by what's happening around us. So how do you think the European child would do on an IQ test, so to speak, that was created by Africans and based on the African experience? So that goal of the IQ test to measure, academic potential and likelihood for success that's also bogus in itself, because guess what? I can assure you, I work in a university, I've been around universities for years now, half my life. White people don't talk about IQ scores to each other like that. They get in a room around you, your black ass, they start talking about IQ scores. White folks don't discuss IQ. I can assure you that. They know it's meaningless. They know certain things. They know that it is limited. They know that it's about they know that intelligence has a lot to do with your environment, has a lot to do with what you practice from a child. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Because while I'm saying that we need to forget about IQ scores, IQ test scores, we should still consider what the IQ test does in fact do well, which is identify learning needs. But one of the reasons why we need to forget the IQ test is because the scores, and by the way, here's how the IQ scores go. You heard Jared Taylor talk about blacks averaging 85. Let me break this down, how the IQ scores go. IQ scores range from 70 up to 140 and beyond. Not many people get 140 and beyond, and I'll explain why. From 70 to 79, that's borderline deficiency. That's what that score will get you classified as. Borderline deficiency. 80 to 89 is dullness. So Jared Taylor is saying that the average black or African scores an 85. So we're just all dullards. We're just all dull people. 90 to 109 is normal or average intelligence. So on top of him insinuating that we're dullards, he's saying we have sub-average intelligence on average. Think about that for a second. That 85 number is very important. And there's a reason why he keeps pushing that 85 number. And there's a reason why white supremacists in general keep pushing that 85 number. To continue, from 110 to 119, that's superior intelligence. When you start getting around white folks as a black person, they start talking about IQ scores and what's your IQ score? Mine's or such and such. They like to hit you some number around 110 to 120. Almost without failure. When it does come up, It doesn't come up amongst white folks like that. They don't put much into it except when they're talking to your black ass in the workplace or in college or something like that. 120 to 140 is very superior intelligence. And remember when I said not many people get over 140? Because that's classified as the genius or near genius level of IQ scoring. So why I'm telling you to forget the IQ test score is because it's known that that score creates low confidence. Do you want your children to have low confidence going forward in life? No, you don't. Based on a test that's fundamentally European in its nature, that's judging your African child within the construct of this European thought? No, you don't. You don't want to give them that complex of low confidence going forward in life. On the flip side, and even white folks know this, those IQ score tests can create unrealistic expectations. And I'll get into why that is. But lastly, the IQ score for black folks can create a flawed understanding of our own potential. That's that low confidence. You have low confidence, so you have a flawed understanding of your potential. And even for some white folks, you get those higher scores, you have a flawed concept of your potential. You expect to do better than what you should. So again, the IQ test is fundamentally flawed because it doesn't take into account environmental factors, and we know that environmental factors aid in intelligence. Second, the IQ test is fundamentally European in its nature, as it tackles things from an abstract and a theoretical viewpoint. The African in particular, and most people I would say even from that half of the world, but the African in particular is really a knowledge-based person, a person who looks at the world around them. That's where we get our intelligence from. That's how we go about solving problems, not in some abstract theoretical way. But also, and that last point comes into this point, the IQ test can't measure emotional and social intelligence. Those are a thing. There is emotional intelligence and there's social intelligence. Emotional intelligence is basically when people can manage emotions because they have more empathy. You know, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Who does that sound like? Who has more empathy that you know? Who has the ability to understand and share the feelings of others around them versus who doesn't? I was reading a paper last week that was talking about how the reason why Trump got into office was because of a lack of empathy on the part of middle class and upper class whites in regards to everyone non-white, when it comes to economics, when it comes to social hierarchy, etc. White folks don't have empathy. And this IQ test that they're trying to trot out here all the time to put you down fundamentally doesn't measure empathy. It doesn't measure your emotional intelligence. That's what it means. That's in part what it means to be African. Furthermore, the IQ test doesn't measure social intelligence. What is social intelligence? Social intelligence is where you learn from experiences with people and learning from success and failures in social settings. Social intelligence is where you learn from experiences with people, from success and failures in social settings. So that's things like common sense, street smarts, tact. Who has that? Who talks all the time about having common sense and having street smarts and tact? So when you add those two things that the IQ test just doesn't cover, that further tells you the test is fundamentally European. It's created for Europeans by Europeans. It's created with European people in mind. And even they don't put much stock into it until they're dealing with your black ass. When I talked about the low confidence in terms of why we should forget about the IQ test, I also wanted to break some news about this thing too, this IQ test, because one of the things that we need to do as black people, we need to stop getting hung up over IQ test scores. As I said before, these tests are ultimately meaningless, and you're going to let something that's ultimately meaningless break down your confidence or your kid's confidence, create unrealistic expectations in terms of, have you thinking that you ain't going to amount to much, is going to flaw the understanding of your potential. These tests are meaningless, so stop letting it affect you and your children for your whole lives. Like I said, white folks don't talk about IQ tests until they're around black folks. And the crazy thing, when you talk about the limitations of IQ tests, one of the limitations of IQ tests is that, truth be told, you can study for IQ tests. I think it was Umar Johnson who said that in white society in America, they were Xeroxing the IQ test and distributing it amongst white families in the burbs. So that these white families were raising their kids on the things that the test tests for. So what does that mean essentially? That means that, number one, the IQ test is way too simplistic because you're not necessarily good on an IQ test but you're good at taking the IQ test. Do you follow what I'm saying? You can be bad at what the IQ test really tests for, but you're just damn good at taking the test. It's not that you're super intelligent or intelligent at all. If I give you the test questions before an exam, you best believe I expect you to score high on the test. And so white families, especially in America, but Europe too, were raising their kids on, short-term memory drills and reasoning and verbal ability. And when you talk about verbal ability, again, let's be honest about something. Europeans, because of their location, tend to speak more than one language, and their children tend to speak more than one language. And that goes a long way in terms of intelligence. That, verbal ability is a huge influence on intelligence. White Americans or European Americans, they tend to marry a lot of people from Europe who bring their customs and their tongue, their language too. And those children are growing up multilingual sometimes, which is in addition to speaking English, which is also adds to their verbal ability, which adds to their intelligence. It's culture and custom amongst white folks to have their kids playing a lot of puzzles and arts and craft at home and all this kind of stuff. And then you send those kids out to go take an IQ test. Of course they're scoring well. You're teaching them how to be good on the test. In fact, I read a story once, and if you're a nurse in America, I want you to tell me if this is also true in America. I got the impression that this was a white woman in Europe, the UK, somewhere there. But she was talking about how when she was a nursing student, a part of the training for nurses was that you had to take the IQ test and do well on it, blah, blah, blah. And she mentioned how she studied the ISENC books. Now, if you don't know who or where the ISENC books come from, ISENC was a German-born PhD psychologist who worked on intelligence and personality and stuff like that. He's renowned. Look him up. He's renowned, and if I remember correctly, his son is now renowned as well. But she studied ISENC's books on intelligence and personality, and she did way better than her peers on the test. If I remember, I think she said she did like 20 points better than everyone else. So doesn't that tell you can study for the test? Doesn't that tell you can study for an IQ test and improve your score, which then in turn is supposedly a sign of your intelligence over everyone else? Don't let white people game you out here. Don't let white folks game you out here. And let their gaming you destroy the future of yourself and your children. As I've mentioned on the show in the past, and even in this broadcast, I've worked around, I went to college, I ended up working at the college I went to, and I've been around universities and colleges for 20 plus years now. And as I mentioned before, I teach college level biology. And I can tell you, when those pre-med students come in, for those of you who don't know, before you could become a doctor, you go to college. You don't have to major in science, but there are certain science courses that are essential that you have to take. And then there's an exam called the MCATs, which is the Medical College Admission Test exam. It's kind of like a standardized test, like the SAT and stuff like that. GMATs and all that stuff. So back in the day, you were required to do a year's worth of college biology, 2 years worth of college chemistry, about a year's worth of college physics, something close, maybe a half a year or a year's worth of college math, calculus. In recent years, they changed it up a little bit. There's a little bit more social sciences in there, a little bit more psychology. They might throw in biochemistry in some programs, but essentially, there were some core science topics that you had to do in college, regardless of your major. And even that's a game. You don't have to major in science to become a doctor. You could major in something real easy like dance or PE or something, and just do really well in the science classes that are required. But the point I'm trying to get across is when you did those sciences in college, you had to take this MCAT exam, this medical college admission test, that tested your knowledge of the sciences that you did in college. Most of these white folks, especially these Jewish guys, I don't care about no ADL, I speak truth to power. Most of these white folks, they do those science classes, but they have, and I've talked about this in the past too, but they have aid in terms of old exams and stuff from some of their peers, the European peers who did the classes before them. They have damn near current exams, sometimes even current exams. Mind you, they also have a home situation, a home environment that's conducive to study. So you have a home environment that's conducive to study and you have the exam, you're going to ace the exams. You're going to ace the classes. But guess what? Acing the classes is still an unsure bet when it comes to that MCAT exam. So guess what these folks have? They have these very expensive MCAT prep courses. You know what the MCAT prep courses do? The MCAT prep courses don't teach you much science. So if you're a student or someone who went through college and you're familiar with what I'm talking about, and even if you're not, look it up. The MCAT prep courses don't spend a whole lot of time teaching you biology or chemistry or math or physics. Nah, you went to college for that. You're supposed to learn that there. The MCAT prep exams, and it's the same thing for the SAT exams as well. They teach you how to take the test. Let me give you an example how this works. Actually, let me take a station ID break, and on the other side, I'll tell you how this works.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. In today's show, we're talking about the IQ test score lie, where that white folks like to perpetrate upon the black community. Tariq Nasheed from Hidden Colors fame and the Mac lessons and all that stuff, he had a debate recently with a white supremacist named Jared Taylor. And to begin with, I talked about the fact that I don't think a guy like Tariq Nasheed especially, and I don't think many blacks should really waste time arguing with white folks about white supremacy. They've had too long a time in telling these lies. They've been born into these lies. Unless you're super thorough, super able to articulate yourself, to bring hard-hitting facts, a tie in a debate like that is a loss. But then I started to talk about the IQ test and its limitations and whatnot. And just before the station ID, I was talking about the MCAT, which is another one of these exams. It's the medical college admission test. And I was talking about how you have to take certain subjects to get into med schools, certain science subjects to get into med schools, and how a lot of white folks who take those classes, they get a lot of help from their peers, people who did the classes before, who have the exams, who give them the exams, plus their home life is conducive to studying the materials that they're given, so of course they do well in these classes. But when it comes to that medical college admission test that's supposed to test your knowledge of the science classes that you did, white folks don't just leave that up to chance. They have these preparatory courses, these MCAT prep courses. There's also SAT prep courses that they take. And those courses, like in the case of the MCAT prep course isn't teaching you so much biology or chemistry or physics or math. No. That preparatory course is designed to teach you how to take the test. And this type of thing is true for the so-called IQ test. White folks for ages have been teaching their kids or raising their kids in such a way that they're going to ace those tests. And as I said before the break, those tests are fundamentally white anyway. They're made with the European in mind, not the African. They're anti-African. So an example of how those MCATs really, those MCAT prep courses really teach people how to take the tests and not really teach them the content, those science subjects. In the MCAT prep classes, right, they teach you something along the lines of you have 4 options as an answer. So you have a question, it's multiple choice. You have, say, 4 options. One of the options is the answer. If you don't know the answer outright, they teach you a way to whittle down the options to give you the highest percentage chance of getting that question right. They teach you to whittle down the 4 options to 2. So let's say you have A, B, C, and D as the options. You whittle it down to A and C, but you're not sure which one. These guys have this shit worked out so deep. They can tell you that a certain percentage of the time, C, the C option, is the correct answer. And there's other little tidbits that they give you that's real deep, really, really deep, and they hammer that shit home to you. And they price it in such a way that the average black kid cannot take those prep courses. And I always tell people, when you see a black doctor, you see a black doctor who came from meager or middle class means, that person is an intelligent person because they took the hard way around. They took the hard way around, trust me. They actually studied those science courses, they knew their shit inside and out, and they scored high on the MCAT exam. The average white folk, the average European white folk, let me tell you something. They play so much games and tricks and they have so many little loopholes and stuff that they exercise, it ain't funny. If you haven't been in college to see it, haven't been in those types of classes to see it, if you were a liberal arts guy in college, you probably didn't see it. You have a bio, chemistry, physics type background, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're dominating because they have a network that allows them to learn to the exam. And so you're going to let these people with these exams tailored to them tell you that your score isn't on par with their score, so something is wrong with you? You're going to let this destroy your confidence going forward in life? Man, forget the IQ test score. Forget it. I didn't say forget the IQ test, mind you. Because as I said at the start of the show, the IQ test does have some small little bit of value in that it can tell you. It's useful in identifying learning needs. But don't base your child's life and future and confidence level on this test. Don't do it. Now, as you know, on this show, I like to talk about black excellence and how we as black people need to always be pushing, making it a directive in our lives, to always be excellent in what we do. It's not about trying to be white. That's an ignorant thing a lot of black folks say. It's not about trying to be white. It's trying to be better, trying to be excellent, trying to get this oppression off of us, trying to fight, to compete, right? To fight the war and to compete. That's what it's about for us. And there's some things we need to work on. So the IQ test score can, and when it comes to certain deficits you might have, certain gaps you might have as far as your learning goes, certain needs you might have, the IQ test score can potentially be helpful there, but you don't hinge all your bets on it. Because white folks don't hinge all their bets on it either. They know that for the most part it's kind of useless, but they like to have those scores because when they get around you, Negroes, they like to be able to tell you, I have a 125. Oh, I scored a 160. What did you score? You go there, you say, 100. Some of you who don't know better might say I scored an 80 or an 85. So forget those IQ test scores, but still work towards black excellence, and you might be able to use those test scores to help you with it. One of the things that we need to work at in the black community is our conversational skills. We gotta be better at listening. We gotta be a little bit better at understanding others, because we naturally are people who learn from our environment, who learn from the successes and failures in social settings, from the people around us, But we gotta be a little bit better in understanding too. We gotta be a little bit better in putting ourselves in various roles, social roles in society. You know the old saying, walk a mile in another man's shoe, or seeing it from someone else's perspective. We also have to manage our first impressions, because people socially will judge your intelligence by their first impression of you. They'll judge your intelligence by the role you play when they meet you. They'll judge your intelligence by how well you actually listen and can talk about whatever is being spoken to you. They will judge your intelligence, and this is not just white people, this is black people too. They'll judge your intelligence by your conversational skills. Some of you may have seen this week where a black guy, I think he was down in Florida. A black guy was basically announcing what college he was going to attend. And I believe the choices was Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama. Football, right? So he was having this kind of coming out announcement party, what school he was going to choose. And just to give you a spoiler if you haven't seen it, he was sitting there with his coach. Some members of his family were behind him. I think a teammate was there, a guidance counselor or something. To his right was his mother and another lady, maybe his aunt or something like that. I'm not sure who she was. When he announced the team, his mother got up during the press conference, live on television, got up, gave him a side eye, and walked out. Now, I've heard different stories since then that the mother was upset that he chose Florida because he's from Florida, and apparently he runs with a bad crew in Florida, and she preferred he went to, I think it was Bama. She preferred he went there. Side note, she might even been paid to help the son decide to go to Bama. Who knows? But that's what I've been hearing, that she walked out because he's clicked in with the gangs in Florida. She wanted him to get out of Florida to have a better life. And him choosing to stay in Florida, I guess she was worried about if he's going to mess it all up, etc. You could research it and see if this is true. But I more so, in this story, I wanted to call the mom a jackass for walking out. But more than that, I wanted you to hear how this kid spoke at the press conference. Take a listen to this.
Jacob, you're going to Florida. Who just got up and left there and to your right? Who got up and left?
Oh, that was my mom.
And why did she walk out and leave?
I don't know. I don't know exactly why she walked out, but yeah, I don't know.
Jacob, we saw her wearing the Alabama sweater there. What were those conversations like with her about where you were going to school?
We had a lot of conversations back and forth about where I should go to school at, but it was like God led me and my gut, and God led me in the direction that my heart desired. So I followed along with it. I couldn't go with my mind. I wanted to go with my heart. So from there on out, God led me on. He told me to pick my decision that I wanted, and that's what I choose.
Jacob, you referenced on Twitter yesterday, I saw the post about how it would have been very emotional. You talked about how you had been crying the night before, agonizing about this decision. Can you just walk us through how you eventually got to this decision and what this process has been like for you?
This process, it been great coming along. We've been recruited for a long time, being a top recruit, top priority for a lot of schools. But knowing that I felt out of all schools, I felt more welcome than home and felt like I could make an impact at the University of Florida. So that's why I felt like that I fit in at and feel like welcome home and being a family. So that's what I like to take my time
to. Do you hear how that guy articulated himself? Now, I'm not trying to clown the kid too much here, but when I listened to the press conference, I'm sorry, but this is what I heard.
We had a lot of conversations back and forth about where I should go to school at, but it was like God led me and my gut, and God led me in the direction that my heart desired. So I followed along with it. I couldn't go with my mind. I wanted to go with my heart. So from there on out, God led me on. He told me to pick my decision that I wanted, and that's what I choose.
Hey, nah, gonna have a good time. Hey, that's what I heard. A mush mouth. I mean, for God's sakes, people, make these kids more articulate out here. My first impression of that guy really wasn't a good one when it comes to intelligence. And he might be an awesome football player, he probably is. But we got to work on those things. The things we have to use an IQ test, if we decide to use it at all, really the score of an IQ test. If we decide to use it at all, like I said, it can be used to, determine any lapses in learning, like areas that need more, that need more scrutiny, that need to be focused in a bit more where our kids are concerned. we could potentially use those scores to tell us those areas. But here's the thing I want all of us to do, especially when we're talking about African-centered education. Aside from the African part of the education, we need to work on the vocab size with kids. When my kids were small, I made a promise that, actually before I had kids, I made a promise that I was not going to have baby talk with them. I wasn't going to ask them if they want a baba, a binky, and all this old shit. You want a bottle? You want a blanket? Cool. Work on vocabulary size with your children. Work on reading comprehension. The better you are at reading, the better you are at speaking. And if I'm lying, I challenge any educator out there to tell me I'm wrong. The bigger your vocabulary, the better you are at speaking. This stuff all works together. Also, work on analogies with kids. Kids should be able to express themselves. Because I can tell you, a well-spoken analogy in a discussion or a debate or what have you can come across so powerful into making your point. Like when Tariq Nasheed made the analogy of, well, actually, I guess I did, when I referenced Tariq's talking about the Mayweather-McGregor fight. If Mayweather didn't beat him handedly, there's a chance they would have given Mayweather a loss. Well, it's the same thing when Tariq goes out here, or any one of us goes out here talking about you debating white supremacists. These guys have centuries and generations of living and telling these lies. So unless you're going to be super thorough, unless you could bring proper comprehension and vocab and conversational skills and listen really well and counterpoints and manage your impressions and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to look good. And only your stans, your super fans, are going to tell you that you did. But ultimately, what I'm getting at here, before I go, I'm getting at the notion that intelligence has everything to do with your upbringing, has everything to do with your environment. Okay? Yes, there's a genetic component. If you take two people that are across the board unintelligent and have kids, and you keep them and you keep those offspring in the same environments that created those two unintelligent parents, chances are the kid is going to be unintelligent also. But if you take that kid away from those unintelligent parents and you put them in the proper setting, a high socioeconomic setting, you're going to see higher IQ scores. So it's all about the environment that you keep, the upbringing that you carry on, and also, again, I want to stress this idea, the IQ test is fundamentally European, so don't put too much stock into it, but work on your kids, work on yourselves. Before I go, actually, let me do a quick station ID, and on the other side, I'll tell you one last thing real quick.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. The last point I wanted to make about IQ tests, because the white supremacists always want to say it's a genetic thing, right? That genetically blacks are inferior, right? And they do that once again to fuck with your outlook going forward, to fuck with your confidence. to make you question everything about black people. So when you see what's going down in Chicago and stuff, you say, well, yeah, that makes sense. We're just a bunch of dumb N-words. But again, that's not true. As Tariq Nasheed said in that interview, white folks like to work off deception. And I will add violence as well. Do you know, I looked this up recently, do you know that they find that IQ rises a few points each decade? In the black community or non-white communities, IQ rises a few points each decade. So riddle me this. Does genetics change every decade? Does genetics change so quickly? I know the answer as a biologist. Hell no. Genetics isn't changing that quickly, so it can't be genetics. It has to be the socioeconomic standing. The environment changes for black folks. It gets slightly better in a lot of instances every decade. And when that happens, the IQ goes up 3 or 5 points every decade on average. So it's simply people improving their skills. It's not so much genetics. Like I said about the white woman who's in nursing school and needed to take an IQ test, she went and studied, and she had a 20-point score that was 20 points higher than everyone else because she went and she studied. She improved upon her skills. So I'm going to say one last time, I'm not telling you to totally dismiss IQ tests. Although I won't be mad at you if you did. But understand that the IQ test is too simplistic, it's too European, it's too flawed for you and your African offspring. And if you let that score and the IQ test ratings, the IQ test score ratings fuck with you, like they like to say black people have an average 85 score, which means that we're dullards, means that we're dull, means that we're below average intelligence on average. If you keep beating someone over the head and telling them they're dumb, they're going to think they're dumb. And if you think you're dumb, you're going to do dumb shit. Think about Chicago. You don't have any expectations of yourself. No pride in yourself. No belief in yourself. You're going to do dumb shit. You're going to do low energy shit. And as you know, we've talked about low energy behaviors before in the black community. Low energy behavior will have you out here killing people. Because you're going to be your most base, most animalistic self. So keep those things in mind going forward, especially those of you with young children. Work on their skills, even if you're not in a great socioeconomic standing. Even if you're not in the greatest environment. Maybe you're in the inner city or projects, but in your home, create an environment where they work on their vocab. They work on their reading comprehension. They work on analogies. They work on problem solving. And this way you'll have a better African going forward. And remember what I said. Ultimately, those IQ scores, even white people don't really fuck with those things that much. Except when they come around you as a black person. They bring their white ass around you and black people and stuff. That's when they start talking about IQ scores. But at the end of the day, your progress in life, your children's progress in life is about the things you do. It's about your accountability. It's about you working on certain skills. That's what it's about. Our intelligence is grounded in the real, not the abstract. So be real about this thing going forward. I want to thank you guys for taking a listen to this week's show. I want to encourage you guys and remind you guys that we have a GoFundMe up. We have a deadline for mid-June. We're trying to raise $2,000 to improve upon the podcasting setup and the marketing of the podcast, because we feel that we want to make our show more visible. We're on YouTube, we're on iTunes, we're on Castbox, we're on all the podcast catcher apps. We're looking to get on TuneIn app soon, but we need to be able to make the recording of these shows more efficient, more streamlined, and most importantly, we need to be able to market this show much more. And, you know, all I'm asking for you to do for the price of a cup of coffee, donate today. Find us on GoFundMe. The link is in the description. Just click it. Please donate. Also, I've mentioned this in the past. I haven't talked about this in a while, but I would love to get a mini team around this podcast to help produce the podcast, to help identify people we should have on as guests. I would like someone who could discuss some current events, who could pull news articles of interest. Ideally, I would like a black woman, strong black woman, to appear on the show. She can do it from wherever she is in the world. It's a remote gig. We can do this all online. She can co-host a show with me, bring up pertinent news articles, pertinent events that some of us might miss, that I might miss. And those things can be topics for discussion on the show. Ultimately, down the road, I'd like to make it where this show at least once a month has a call-in show where you guys who have questions or who want to talk about certain topics can call in and we could discuss it on the show. If you are a black woman and you have interest in what I just spoke about, please contact us at bitter.medicine.podcast@gmail.com. Email us today. Let us know your availability, your interests, etc. And let's get this show really rolling. Until next time, thanks again for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I will be talking to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.